In the heart of a brutal winter storm, deep within the Nevada wilderness, a mustang lies frozen in the snow, barely clinging to life. The wind howls through the mountains, and the thick swirling snow conceals any traces of the wild creature's struggle. It has been abandoned, left to perish alone in the frigid cold. But then, out of nowhere, a man appears, a stranger to this land. His name is Cole, a rancher, and he comes across the injured horse, barely able to move, its body bruised and its breath shallow. In that moment, the mustang, against all odds, raises its head and locks eyes with Cole. Desperation fills its gaze, and with a final heart-wrenching cry, the horse pleads for help. What happens next will change everything Cole thought he knew about survival, compassion, and the unbreakable bond between man and horse. The storm rages on as Cole rides through the blinding snow. His horse's hooves crunch through thick layers of ice that have coated the ground. The wind is relentless, cutting through his jacket as though it has a mind of its own. Visibility is nearly non-existent, and though Cole knows this area well, the desolation of the frozen landscape makes him feel smaller than ever before. His family's ranch is miles behind him, and he had hoped to return before the snowstorm intensified. But it is now clear that he will not make it in time. As he urges his horse forward, Cole thinks of the warmth of his cabin and the hot meal waiting for him. But then, something catches his attention. In the distance, barely visible in the white haze, a dark shape stands motionless. Curiosity seizes him. He turns his horse toward it, hoping it is nothing more than a tree or a pile of rocks. But as he gets closer, his heart sinks. It is a horse, a mustang, wild and proud, but clearly in distress. The snow around the horse is stained with blood, and the animal's sides heave with shallow breaths. Cole dismounts and walks toward the horse slowly, his boots crunching on the frozen earth. The mustang is lying on the ground, its legs splayed awkwardly beneath it. Its eyes are wide with terror, locked onto Cole's for a moment. The two of them stare at each other, man and beast, strangers in the storm. The mustang's body trembles from the cold, but it makes no attempt to flee. Cole kneels beside the animal, feeling his heart race. He has seen a lot in his years on the ranch, but nothing like this. The mustang's ribs are visible beneath its matted coat, and Cole can see the deep cuts along its flanks. The animal has been through hell. "Hey there," Cole says softly, his voice barely audible above the howling wind. "It is all right. I'm not here to hurt you." He reaches out cautiously, his gloved hand brushing against the horse's neck. To his surprise, the mustang does not pull away. Instead, it lets out a soft whinny, its breath coming in quick bursts. Cole's chest tightens. The animal is too weak to stand, but the sheer strength in its eyes tells him it is not ready to give up. The storm worsens, the snow falling in thick sheets now. Cole knows he cannot leave the horse out here. He must do something. Alone, miles from help, and with the mustang in no condition to survive much longer in this weather, he mutters to himself, "Hang on." Looking around, he spots a small shack nearby, an old hunting cabin he used to visit in his younger days. He has to get the mustang there, out of the storm. But carrying the mustang is nearly impossible. He cannot risk leaving it alone, but how can he save it? The horse lets out another soft, desperate whinny, and Cole's heart clenches. It is not asking for much. It is asking for help. Without thinking, he reaches into his pack for the emergency rope he always keeps with him. "You are not alone," he whispers more to himself than to the horse. With the storm howling around them, Cole ties the rope gently around the mustang's chest, securing it as best as he can. The horse's eyes follow him, the pain and exhaustion evident in them, nearly breaking Cole's resolve. He tightens the knot and slowly begins to pull, leading the mustang toward the cabin, step by step. The snow is falling heavier now, and every breath Cole takes feels like it could be his last. He can barely see through the blizzard, but the urgency in the mustang's movements keeps him going. As they approach the cabin, Cole's heart races. The mustang stumbles, its legs buckling beneath it. Cole's hands shake as he steadies the animal. "You're going to make it," he says, though he is not sure he believes it. "You have to." The mustang's head droops, and for a moment, Cole fears it might collapse completely. But then the horse raises its head again, staring at him with eyes full of something like trust. In that moment, Cole understands. This is not just about survival. It is about something deeper, something that transcends the wild instincts of the mustang and the duty of the rancher. It is a bond formed in the midst of a brutal storm between two beings fighting against the odds. Cole swallows hard, his breath coming in labored gasps. "I'm not leaving you, buddy. We are in this together." Just as they reach the cabin door, the mustang lets out a low, pleading whinny. The sound sends a shiver down Cole's spine. Something inside him snaps, and a fierce determination takes over. He is not going to let this horse die in the cold. Inside the small cabin, the fire crackles in the hearth, its warmth a stark contrast to the howling blizzard outside. Cole has done everything he can think of to help the Mustang. He has laid down hay to cushion the horse's exhausted body, covered it with blankets, and made sure it is sheltered from the storm. But no matter what he does, the Mustang's breathing remains shallow, and its body trembles with every exhale. Cole sits nearby, his hands still cold despite the fire, watching the horse intently. He can hear the steady thrum of his own heartbeat. The silence between them is heavy with unspoken words. He never expected this. He never expected to find a creature in such distress, needing help that only he can give. His mind races as he thinks about the difficulties back at the ranch. His family's business has been struggling for months. The price of feed has skyrocketed, and the crops have not been able to withstand the extreme weather. It is just him and his younger sister now, trying to make ends meet. This is not how he imagined his life. Alone in the middle of nowhere, trying to rescue a horse he did not even know. But he cannot turn his back. He cannot leave the animal to die out there. Cole leaned forward, his fingers brushing the Mustang's mane. The horse's muscles twitched, a clear sign that it was still conscious, still holding on. He could not let the animal go just yet, not while it was still fighting. Minutes passed, then hours. Cole tried everything he could think of to help the Mustang regain its strength. He rubbed the horse's legs, trying to get the blood circulating again. He spoke softly to it, hoping his presence would offer some comfort. But the Mustang only responded with shallow breaths. It was as if the weight of the world was simply too much for it to carry. Then, just as Cole was preparing to retrieve more supplies from the saddlebag, he heard a faint noise, a soft whinny. His heart skipped. The Mustang was trying to speak. Cole rushed back to its side, kneeling down beside the animal. "Hey, we're going to be all right," he whispered, more to reassure himself and the horse. The Mustang's eyes flickered open, its gaze locking on Cole. There was raw desperation in those eyes, a plea that Cole could not ignore. The storm outside continued to rage, but inside the cabin, time seemed to stand still. Cole stayed by the Mustang's side, holding its head gently, offering whatever comfort he could. It was a strange feeling, this responsibility he had taken on. In a way, he felt a deep connection to the horse now. It was no longer just a wild animal. It had become something more, something that needed him just as much as he needed it. Cole thought back to his life before the ranch, before everything had changed. He had grown up surrounded by animals, always with a love for horses. But life had pulled him into a more solitary existence, away from the freedom and companionship of his youth. In a way, this horse reminded him of the life he had once dreamed of, a life of freedom and strength. He glanced out the window at the swirling snow, his mind racing with thoughts of what the future might hold. He could not stay here forever. He had to get back to the ranch, to his family, to his life. But how could he leave this animal? How could he leave something that had made its last plea for help? Suddenly, the Mustang shifted its body, trembling as it struggled to rise. Cole's heart surged with hope. "Easy, buddy," he whispered, his hands quickly reaching to steady the animal. The Mustang's legs wobbled, and for a moment, Cole feared it would fall again. But the horse managed to stand, albeit shakily. "You are stronger than you look," Cole murmured. The Mustang took a few slow steps, its hooves scraping lightly against the wooden floor. Cole moved to stand beside it, his hand on its shoulder. "We're going to get through this together," he said, the words flowing more easily now. He did not know how, but he would find a way. But just as he began to feel a spark of hope, a loud crack echoed through the room, the unmistakable sound of the roof creaking under the weight of the snowstorm. Cole froze, his eyes widening in alarm. The Mustang's head snapped toward the ceiling, its ears twitching nervously. The wind howled, and the storm seemed to intensify with every passing second. Cole's pulse quickened. The cabin was not going to hold much longer. He needed to get the Mustang back out into the storm. The storm outside was fierce, but the cabin, though offering temporary shelter, would not be enough. He grabbed the rope again, looping it carefully around the horse's chest. His fingers trembled from the cold. "Come on, we are not giving up now," Cole muttered. The Mustang, though weak, gave a low whinny, as if understanding the urgency. Together they moved toward the door, the blizzard outside waiting for them. But as they stepped out into the snow, Cole realized the real challenge had just begun. The storm was fiercer than ever, and he was about to face a test like no other. The Mustang, still shaking, was depending on him to survive. The wind howled like a living creature, whipping the snow into blinding torrents that cut through Cole's clothes and froze his breath midair. The Mustang stumbled beside him, its legs unsteady in the thick snow, but there was a fire in its eyes that refused to be extinguished. Cole's heart raced in time with the pounding of his own hooves, each step carrying them deeper into the storm. The cabin had been their brief sanctuary, but it could not protect them for long. The blizzard was relentless. The storm had moved in faster than he anticipated, and now he was trapped out in the wilderness with the injured Mustang, nowhere near shelter and only his instincts to guide him. "You're doing good," Cole muttered through gritted teeth, his voice barely audible over the roar of the wind. "Just keep going, we are getting to higher ground." He knew that if they did not reach a ridge soon, they would be lost. The snow was coming down harder now, and he could feel the temperature dropping even further. His breath clouded in front of him, each inhalation stinging as though his lungs themselves were freezing. The Mustang staggered beside him, its head down and its breath shallow. Every time the horse's legs gave way, Cole's heart skipped a beat. He reached out, grabbing the rope that tied them together, and gently tugged it, urging the horse to take a few more steps. "Come on, you have got this," Cole said, his voice cracking from the cold. He was unsure whether his words were meant for the Mustang or for himself. He had never been in a storm this bad before. He had never felt so exposed. As they trudged forward, Cole's mind raced with thoughts of his sister back at the ranch. He had promised her he would be back before dark, but that had been hours ago. He should have known the storm was coming. He should have prepared better. But now, it was just him and the Mustang, and he had to get them through this. There was no other choice. The snow continued to fall in sheets, covering the ground. Each gust of wind reduced visibility to mere feet, and Cole could see nothing beyond the blur of white in front of him. He gripped the rope tighter, hoping the Mustang was still behind him. A soft whinny broke through the howling wind, and Cole stopped dead in his tracks. His heart leaped in his chest. He turned around quickly, his breath catching in his throat. The Mustang was no longer following him. "Hey," Cole called, his voice desperate. "Where are you going?" The wind carried the sound of the horse's hooves, but there was no response. Cole pushed forward through the snow, his boots sinking deeper into the frozen ground. The storm was so fierce that he could barely see anything, but the unmistakable sound of the Mustang's movements kept him going. He tugged harder on the rope, hoping to draw the animal back to him, but it was not working. Panic surged through Cole's mind, fear settling in. He had to get the horse back before it wandered too far, before the storm swallowed them both. The snow was thickening, and the blizzard seemed to be moving faster. Cole's heart pounded in his chest as he stumbled forward, his legs growing heavier with every step. He could not lose the Mustang, not now. Suddenly the rope jerked hard in his hands, nearly pulling him off his feet. The Mustang was pulling away, fighting against the pull. Panic surged through Cole's chest, but he refused to let go. "Stop!" Cole shouted, his voice ragged. He gritted his teeth and yanked on the rope, forcing the Mustang to come back toward him. The horse whinnied loudly, and for a moment, Cole thought he heard something else in the sound, something that resembled pain. His stomach churned. The Mustang was exhausted, and the storm had drained every ounce of strength from it. "Please, just stay with me," Cole whispered, feeling helpless. The wind howled, biting into his face, and the snow began to fall even heavier, nearly blinding him. He could feel the cold sinking deep into his bones, but there was no time to stop. The Mustang stopped struggling against the rope, and Cole pulled it toward him, desperate to keep the animal on its feet. They were running out of time, and Cole knew that if they did not find shelter soon, neither of them would survive the storm. With a final effort, the Mustang's hooves broke through the snow, and it collapsed to its knees in exhaustion. Cole rushed to its side, his hands trembling as he tried to help the horse get back on its feet. He felt his heart skip a beat when the Mustang's eyes met his, raw and pleading. There was a silent understanding between them now. The storm was fierce, and Cole could feel his strength slipping away. He had to act fast. Wiping the snow from his face, Cole looked around desperately. Just beyond them, a small rock outcropping rose from the ground, just enough to provide a bit of shelter from the storm. "That is our chance," Cole said more to himself than to the Mustang. He grabbed the rope, and with every ounce of strength left in his body, he guided the horse toward the rock shelter. The snow was up to their knees, but every step felt like an eternity. Finally, they reached the outcropping. It was not much, but it was enough. They were out of the wind, sheltered from the worst of the storm. Cole collapsed next to the Mustang, his body shaking with exhaustion. "We made it," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the storm. The Mustang, still trembling, lowered its head. Cole rested his hand on its neck, feeling the warmth of its body in contrast to the bitter cold that surrounded them. They were both battered, both on the brink of collapse, but in that moment, they were alive and together. The storm's fury had not relented, and Cole's muscles were stiff from hours of fighting against the snow. The small rock outcropping offered little comfort, but it was enough to keep them out of the worst of the wind. Still, the cold gnawed at his bones, and he could feel the warmth of his body slowly draining away as the hours ticked by. The Mustang was still beside him, shivering uncontrollably, its coat matted with snow and sweat. It had been silent for what felt like an eternity, its shallow breaths the only sound in the vast frozen wasteland. Cole had tried everything, wrapping the horse in blankets, rubbing its legs to get the blood flowing, but nothing seemed to work. The Mustang's strength was failing faster than Cole had expected, and the harsh reality was setting in. He could not let the horse die, not here, not like this. Cole glanced out at the storm, his eyes narrowing. There was no sign of it letting up. The wind had picked up even more, and the snow was falling in thick, heavy sheets, blurring everything beyond 10 feet. He could not even see the path they had taken to get here. His mind raced as he looked down at the Mustang. The horse's eyes, once full of fire, now seemed dull with exhaustion. It was clear that it could not go any further, and Cole knew it would not survive the storm if they stayed here much longer. But he could not carry it. There was no way. He clenched his fists. He could not just leave the horse to die in the storm. That was not who he was. But there were no easy answers. Cole thought of the ranch of his sister, alone and waiting for him to come back. If he did not make it back soon, they would both be in serious trouble. The ranch was barely holding on as it was, and he could not afford to be lost out here forever. He stood up slowly, his legs aching from the cold, and looked at the Mustang one last time. The animal's eyes followed him, a pleading look in them. It was as if the Mustang knew that Cole was about to make the hardest choice of his life. "Stay here," Cole whispered more to himself than to the horse. "I will go get help." He turned toward the direction he thought the ranch was, trying to steady his breath despite the cold. He had no choice. He had to leave the Mustang, at least for a little while, and get back to the ranch. Maybe he could find someone to help, someone who could get back to the Mustang before it was too late. But as he took a few steps, the wind howling behind him, something inside him twisted. The look in the Mustang's eyes had shaken into his core. It was an animal that had survived the wild for years, strong and independent, and yet now it was dependent on him, on Cole. He could not bring himself to walk away. But was he walking away, or was he just trying to get help to bring someone back who could save them both? He stopped, his boots frozen to the ground as the thought sank in. He could not just leave it, not now, not after everything they had been through together. The snow seemed to swirl even more violently, as if the storm itself was urging him forward, testing his resolve. His breath came in short gasps, and the weight of the situation hung heavy on his chest. If he left, the Mustang might not make it. If he stayed, they both could die. Cole glanced back at the Mustang, whose eyes followed him with a quiet trust that made his heart ache. "I am not leaving you," he said firmly, his voice barely audible over the wind. "We are in this together." With that, Cole took a deep breath and made his decision. He could not risk leaving the Mustang behind, but he also could not stay in the rock shelter, freezing and alone, with no way to get help. There was only one choice left. Cole's hands trembled as he untied the rope from the Mustang's chest, carefully guiding the horse to its feet. The Mustang wobbled, its legs giving out once more, but Cole was there to hold it up, refusing to let it fall. The horse seemed to gather itself for a moment before pushing forward, determined to keep moving despite its exhaustion. Cole's heart swelled with pride. This horse, this wild Mustang, had survived against all odds, and now it was looking to him for the strength to face one more challenge. He tied the rope back around the Mustang's chest, taking a deep breath and ensuring the animal was steady enough to walk. "We're not giving up," Cole said softly, unsure whether the words were for the Mustang's benefit or his own. The wind still howled around them, but Cole could feel determination surging through him. He could not let the storm stop them. Not now. Together, they stepped out of the small shelter and into the snowstorm once more. The wind tore at their faces, but neither of them wavered. Each step was harder than the last, but they kept moving forward. Cole's body screamed for rest, but he kept going. The Mustang's legs were shaky, but it kept moving. In the distance, Cole thought he saw something. A faint shadow through the snow, a silhouette he could not quite make out. His heart skipped a beat. Was it a tree, a rock formation, or something else? "Keep going," Cole urged, his voice rough. He was not sure how much farther they could go, but as long as the Mustang was with him, he could not stop, not yet. The storm showed no mercy. The blizzard had worsened overnight, and the snowfall had piled up deeper than ever before. It felt as if the world had been swallowed by white, with no end in sight. Every step Cole and the Mustang took felt like they were fighting an invisible force. The wind tore at them with cold fingers, stinging their skin and numbing their bones. They had not made much progress. The Mustang was slowing down, its legs trembling, its coat coated in a thick layer of snow. Colt was exhausted too, barely able to keep his eyes open as he trudged through the knee-deep snow. But he could not stop, not yet. Every now and then, he glanced back at the Mustang, its breath heavy and labored. A deep, unsettling feeling grew in his chest. He knew the horse was struggling to stay on its feet, but Cole had to keep moving. He had to get them out of this. The ridge was just ahead, or so he hoped. His mind was cloudy from exhaustion, but he remembered it from before. The ridge had been their goal. If they could get there, they would be able to see the cabin. He was sure of it. Just a little longer, Cole whispered to the Mustang, his voice hoarse from cold and fatigue. "We are almost there. You can make it." But even as he spoke the words, doubt gnawed at him. The storm was relentless, and the visibility was almost zero. They could be walking in circles for all he knew. The Mustang faltered beside him, and this time, Cole could not catch it in time. The horse collapsed into the snow with a strained whinny, its legs giving way beneath it. Cole's heart stopped. He dropped to his knees in the snow beside the horse, his breath shallow as he tried to catch his bearings. "No, no, no," Cole muttered, feeling the cold biting deeper as panic crept into his voice. His hands shook as he tried to lift the Mustang back onto its feet, but the horse's body was limp, its eyes closed in exhaustion. It was then that he realized how close they were to the edge of the ridge. If they did not get to higher ground, they might not make it at all. The snow was piling up faster, and the storm showed no signs of relenting. Cole pressed his face against the Mustang's mane, his own tears freezing in the air. He was losing the fight. The horse was not going to make it through this. "I am sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. He did not know if the horse could hear him, but it did not matter anymore. He had failed his promise to his sister, failed his promise to the Mustang. It all seemed so meaningless now. They were not going to survive this. But then, just as Cole thought he could not go on, something unexpected happened. The Mustang stirred beneath him, a soft trembling movement that barely registered at first. Then the horse's head lifted slightly, its eyes slowly opening and locking onto Cole with a quiet intensity. For a moment, Cole just stared at the Mustang, his heart hammering in his chest. Was it possible? Was the horse really going to get up? The Mustang's legs quivered beneath it, but then, with a deep, pained breath, it pushed itself upright. Cole gasped, barely able to believe his eyes. It was happening. The horse was still fighting. It was still alive. Cole scrambled to his feet, his hands trembling as he guided the horse back onto its legs. The Mustang swayed but did not fall. "Come on," Cole urged, his voice hoarse but steady now. "We're not giving up. You're not giving up." The Mustang seemed to hear him. It shifted its weight, taking hesitant steps forward. Each one was slow and careful, but it moved. Together, they took one step after another, inching closer to the ridge. The storm raged on, but the bond between them was unbreakable. They were both at their breaking point, but neither of them was ready to give in. The storm howled louder than ever as they climbed higher, their bodies screaming in protest. The snow seemed to grow deeper with every step, but Cole could see the ridge now, just within reach. It was not much, just a small rise in the land, but it was all they needed. From there, they would be able to see the cabin. The Mustang's movements were sluggish, but with each step, Cole's hope grew stronger. They were getting closer, but then, as they crested the ridge, something hit Cole like a punch to the stomach. The sight that met his eyes was nothing like he had expected. A figure stood at the top of the ridge, barely visible through the snowstorm. For a moment, Cole thought his mind was playing tricks on him. But then the figure waved, and Cole's heart skipped a beat. It was a person. A rescuer, maybe. Someone who had come looking for them. "Hey," Cole shouted, his voice barely carrying over the storm. "Over here." "We need help." The figure did not respond, but they turned and started moving toward Cole. His heart raced with both fear and hope. Maybe they were not alone. Maybe there was a chance after all. But as the figure drew closer, something shifted in Cole's chest. The shape was not quite right, and the way they moved was unfamiliar. It moved too slowly, too hesitantly, as though struggling with the same exhaustion Cole was fighting. Cole squinted, trying to make out more details, and then it hit him. This was not a rescuer. This was someone who, like him, had been lost in the storm. Another survivor, battling nature's fury. The Mustang let out a low whinny, and Cole turned to see it looking at him with the same urgency he had felt moments before. The horse's eyes were wide with fear, and for the first time since this nightmare had started, Cole realized he was not alone in this fight against the storm. They were all struggling for survival now. The figure on the ridge was now close enough that Cole could make out their clothing, heavy layers meant to protect from the storm. But the closer the figure came, the more Cole's sense of dread grew. They were not rushing toward him, not with urgency. They moved slowly, almost deliberately, and something about their posture screamed exhaustion and defeat. Cole took a hesitant step forward, the snow beneath his boots cracking with the weight of his movement. The Mustang followed, its legs unsteady but determined. Cole barely noticed the cold anymore, his mind consumed with the figure ahead. As the figure drew even closer, Cole saw the way they staggered, as if struggling to hold themselves upright. For a second, his heart leaped with hope. Maybe this person knew something, maybe they were prepared for the storm. But that hope shattered when the figure collapsed into the snow with a soft, helpless cry. "Hey!" Cole rushed toward them, his feet slipping on the icy ground. "Are you all right?" The figure groaned, weakly pushing themselves up. The storm was relentless, the wind cutting through everything. For a moment, Cole was unsure if the person had even heard him. Then, through the howling wind, the figure's voice came, ragged and faint. "It is too late." Cole's heart clenched. He knelt beside the figure, brushing the snow from their face. The man was younger than Cole, with a face that looked far too pale. He had the gaunt look of someone who had been lost in the storm far longer than Cole. Where are you from?" Cole asked, his voice tight with concern and frustration. This was not supposed to be happening. They were supposed to help each other, not succumb to the storm. The man's eyes flickered, struggling to focus. I was heading back to the ranch. The snow, I couldn't make it too far." Cole felt panic rise in his chest. The man had come from the same direction they were heading. If he had failed, if he had not made it back, what hope did Cole have? "We are not far from the ridge," Cole said, forcing calmness into his voice despite the rising fear. "We can make it. You and me. We will get through this." The Mustang shifted nervously beside him, sensing the rising tension. The horse snorted and stamped its feet in the snow. Cole glanced at the Mustang and then back at the man. "I will help you," Cole said, his voice firm. "I will not leave you here." The man shook his head weakly. It is too much, but Cole refused to listen. His mind was made up. The Mustang had fought through everything, and now so would he. The storm might be trying to break him, but he was not going to let it take anyone else, not this time. "I'm not leaving you," Cole repeated more forcefully. He took a step forward, offering the man his arm. "We are in this together." The man hesitated, his gaze drifting to the Mustang, who stood unwavering beside Cole, as though to affirm his words. The Mustang seemed to sense the urgency, its breath coming out in thick puffs, its body trembling from exhaustion but still standing tall. Slowly the man reached out his hand, shaky but strong enough to grasp Cole's arm. "All right," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "All right, let's go." They began moving forward, the snow stinging their faces, as the wind whipped mercilessly around them. Cole was unsure if the man could even make it to the ridge, and he was not sure if either of them could. But he was determined to try. The Mustang was a steady presence beside him, its steps slow but purposeful. They moved as a unit now, three souls fighting against the elements. There was no time for doubt, no room for hesitation, but then, as they pushed through the snow, the wind suddenly died down, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. The storm seemed to pause for just a moment, a brief lull in the chaos that had gripped them for what felt like forever. Cole looked up, and his breath caught in his throat. Through the clearing snow, he saw something, a faint outline in the distance, a silhouette, the shape of a building. "The cabin," Cole whispered to the man, his voice barely audible in the stillness, but just as he spoke, the storm picked up again, stronger than before. The wind tore through them with renewed fury, and the snow once again blurred everything in front of them. The man beside him stumbled, his feet slipping out from under him as his strength failed. Cole reached out, catching him just in time before he hit the ground. "You can't give up now," Cole urged, his voice raw. "We are so close. You are not going to die out here. We are almost there." But the man only shook his head, a weak, defeated laugh escaping his lips. "It is too late for me," he said, his voice full of resignation. "You need to go. You need to make it." The words hit Cole like a punch to the gut. He was not ready to let go of the man, not yet. But as he looked at the Mustang, its steady, unwavering presence beside them, Cole knew what he had to do. He could not carry this man any further. He could not let the storm break them both. "We will make it together," Cole said, his voice trembling with resolve. He helped the man back to his feet and pushed forward. "We are almost there." And this time, with every step they took, Cole felt the pull of hope. It was not just the cabin in the distance. It was something deeper, a belief that no matter what the storm had taken from them, they could still make it. Together, the storm was relentless, the wind howling with fury. Yet somehow the cabin ahead seemed to grow clearer with each agonizing step. Every part of Cole's body screamed for rest, for relief from the cold that gnawed at him. But he refused to stop. Not now. The man, though weak and barely able to keep up, was still with him. And the Mustang? Oh, the Mustang. Its body shuddered from exhaustion, but still it pressed forward beside them. The horse had become more than just a companion. It had become a symbol of everything they had fought through together: resilience, hope, survival. With every step closer to the cabin, Cole's heart grew heavier with the weight of the choice that was coming. The man beside him was still fading, his steps slower, his breath shallow. Cole could feel the man's weight against him, and he knew that if they did not make it to shelter soon, they might lose him. The storm had taken too much already, but they were so close. The cabin was no longer just a shadow. It was a tangible reality. Cole could see the soft glow of light peeking from the windows, a promise of warmth and safety just within reach. "Stay with me," Cole whispered, his voice hoarse as he tightened his grip on the man's arm. He was growing desperate now, his thoughts turning into frantic pleas, but he could not show it. Not yet. Not when they were so close. The Mustang snorted, as if urging them forward. With one final, strained push, they reached the door of the cabin. Cole was so out of breath that he could not even bring himself to knock. Instead, he pushed the door open with every last ounce of strength he had left. The warmth inside hit him like a wave, and for a moment, he just stood there, blinking, trying to adjust to the sudden shift from the biting cold to the enveloping heat. But there was no time to relish in the relief. The man beside him was slumped, his legs giving way beneath him, and Cole gently guided him toward a chair. "Help him," Cole called out, his voice shaking with both fear and exhaustion. Inside the cabin, an older woman rushed to the man's side. She looked like someone who had seen much in her years, her face weathered by time and experience. But the look in her eyes as she glanced at Cole was one of recognition. She had seen people come in from the storm before, people who had gone through this exact battle. She immediately went to work, checking the man's pulse and murmuring words of comfort, as she wrapped him in blankets, trying to warm his frozen body. Cole stepped back, watching the scene unfold. His heart pounded in his chest. He wanted to help, but all he could do was stand there helpless, as the older woman worked quickly and efficiently. His attention then turned to the Mustang, still standing in the doorway. The horse was shivering violently, its chest heaving as it stood there exhausted and on the verge of collapse. "I am so sorry," Cole whispered to the Mustang, feeling his chest tighten. He stepped over to the horse, his hands trembling as he patted its freezing coat. "We are here now. You made it." The Mustang, as if understanding, nuzzled him gently. Its breath was ragged, and its eyes were full of fatigue, but there was something more in those eyes. Something that told Cole that this journey had meant more than just survival. The older woman finished checking the man's vitals and looked up at Cole. "He is alive, but he is in bad shape," she said softly. "We will need to keep him warm and monitor him." Cole exhaled the breath he had not realized he was holding. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He turned back to the Mustang. "Now we just need to take care of you too." The woman gave him a soft smile. "We will get the horse inside as well. There is a stable out back, but we will need to bring him in carefully. He is as much a survivor as you are." Cole nodded, his body feeling drained of all energy. But as he looked back at the Mustang, he realized something. Both of them had made it. Against all odds, they had survived the storm. The storm had tried to take everything from them, but in the end, it had only strengthened their bond. It had tested their courage, their resilience, and their will to fight, but it had not broken them. The older woman helped Cole guide the Mustang toward the stable, and, as he led the horse inside, he turned back to see the man now wrapped in blankets, his breathing steady but still shallow. It was not over, not yet. But the hardest part was behind them. As the door of the stable closed, Cole rested his head against the Mustang's side, feeling the warmth of the horse's body against his. They had made it, against all odds. They had found their way home, and in that moment, as the storm raged on outside, Cole knew one thing for sure: they were stronger than the storm, and they would always be. If this story touched your heart, remember that courage and compassion can overcome any challenge. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share it with someone who loves heartfelt stories like this one.